What are we looking at? Because it looks amazing.
This is it reminds me of the sun pushing its heat towards us, and the heat of the sun moving faster through these currents. And
well, that's generally true.
It's heat. Also, I believe that it's warm. Correct. There's some heat transfer coming off of the sun in these Birkeland currents. It's not just cold. It might be surrounded in an insular from the cold vacuous space around the currents, but I believe that heat is moving through Birkeland currents as well, and in the form of plasma. And if it isn't, then somehow that heat has to be insulated.
Continuing the Electric View's April 10th show, we will be talking about the growth of materials, the fractal sets, and we'll end up discussing the new compact nuclear fusion reactor. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. It actually is insulated. It's a common misconception that space is cold. Space is nothing. Like, it's hard to imagine that there's no temperature, but there's not enough material to hit you. Like atoms, basically heat is transferred by atoms of, sometimes radiantly, but then there's convection, of course, and then there's conduction, which is basically like the atmosphere around my hand gets hot because my hand is hotter or I'm hotter or whatever, and the heat rises off of me, so to speak. But in space, there's not enough atoms bouncing off of you to transfer heat away from you, so it's sort of like being in a thermos. So one of the problems of going to the moon is not keeping yourself warm so that you'll survive the trip. No, it's cooling yourself off so you won't cook yourselves to death inside this little box, because all of your bodies, all of your breath, all of everything, including if you're in a spacesuit, there's nothing to get rid of the heat. It's just going to, that's why they were white, I assume, so that they would reflect as much heat as possible. And because the only thing that would actually remove heat is you standing on the ground. It would go through your feet to the dirt below. That's possible. And once it starts getting, something gets heated up on the surface up by the sun, there's nowhere for it to go. So yeah, the surface of the moon, for example, was relatively hot in the sunlight because it couldn't bleed the heat off to the air. There's nothing to bleed it off to. That kind of thing happens. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that this is the interesting way that heat is. There's a thermal effect, as you said. It's a thermos.
It has to be like thermoelectric. I don't know if that's a term, but like if it's
in a way,
the sun, so then that heat transfer, if it packs up into tiny little quanta, tiny little particles that are bombarding, like quote unquote space wind that's moving into the poles. Because at some point that heat becomes electric as plasma, as charge. It becomes charge. So when heat becomes charge, and it starts moving through these sheets of Birkeland currents, and it starts impinging on the poles, and it electrically moves straight through the ice sheets on the poles because it's most conductive at the poles, and and electricity moves better through cold things, as far as I know. Like ice is a good conductor, as far as I think. I've heard this before. So it gravitates right to the poles, and the charge moves through the poles, reverses, and goes out the other side, and does a reconnect loop, and does a feedback loop with the next planet. And all of these things are on this pearl, like winding pearl. The planets, it seems to me anyway, and there's a flow that's moving from one planet to another, a forward current and a backward current. These currents need to be named, dude. Like, because if there's counter rotation, that means one thing. One sheath is moving one direction, and one sheath is moving the other direction, and they move like that. So there has to be this transfer. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and you're not necessarily wrong. For example, Dr. Donald Scott talked about in his book Electric Sky, specifically on the double layer, how there's area. For example, you know that there's parts of the flame of your match when you light a match. There's parts that are hotter and better and light things better than other layers. Like if it's near the head, it doesn't work as well. But if out in that nice shiny spot, like it's definitely where you want to light your cigarette from, type of thing. And this situation that's a chemical reaction, obviously, but it has a similar property because chemical reactions are technically electrical in nature because it's an exothermic reaction or so forth. One of the things that happens on the sun is that you have a place where there is there's a place where it doesn't appear that there's any heat because it's me and Edwin were talking about this, how it can be electrical, how it starts moving in a certain direction and it loses its random collision, which is heat. And there's parts of the corona is really hot, and other parts, once it starts going all in the same direction, the heat is no longer there, and it's literally an electric current. And it's being pulled along by the currents themselves. So there is something to say about that. We were having this argument about, debate regarding the Peltier effect and thermopiles and so forth because of that similar characteristic.
And then there's pinch points, like right after the magnetic X points on our the magnetosphere too. And so so after the Birkeland current moves through the Earth, reverses polarity through the Earth, it comes back and reverses again at do you guys know what point I'm talking about? There's a point where they reconnect and they flip and reverse on the tail of the magnetosphere.
There is a plasmoid in our tail.
What's the name of that?
They don't have a name.
There is an X spot. I forget what they call it. There's a couple of them, and then it reverses again. And I think that this is how the Birkeland currents flow. They reverse, and they're helical. And there's a helical induction going on here, and it moves helical like the serpent, the snake. Going back to this in all cultures, and then this serpentine like snake winding goes and then hits the next planet, and all of the different moons and whatnot. But I mean, I just like visualizing it and like, because I draw it all the time and I see it, and you can see it inside of DJ Sadu's How Does the Earth Move, or How Does the Solar System Move Through Space, and it's definitely helical, and then the helical tailspin.
Yes, when they're I've seen that one where people I try to because there are certain reference points. The sun, of course, has its own electric field around it, so we are generally not moving in that electric field, and besides in circles, obviously, but we're not going in and out from the anode, the sun. Comets do that, and that's what makes them glow. We only glow at the poles. Well, and of course, all the lightning bolts over top of us. And our that little glow that we have around the ionosphere, that little shimmer there. Sorry, just seeing, it's beautiful looking at those pictures from the International Space Station and getting a look at the Earth. This is giving me nightmares, whatever you're doing here.
Is it? Yeah.
No, it's not really. It's just, I'm just kidding. It just looks so
very,
cool.
Very nice production that I ran across, but it was done over in China, and it's very high level photography of chemical reactions. So
it's beautiful, really.
I thought it was interesting, yeah.
It reminds me of wax, like moving through water.
That's kind of what I was thinking it was. Yeah.
So they've got a whole. It's basically they got fairly high. This is one of them here, but fairly high level chemists, along with fairly high level video / photographers. Here's a good example of combining two disparate fields into something and produce something that everyone finds amazing and beautiful. So. So I was playing around with these. This is like a new release of Mandelbulber. It's a 3D fractal renderer that just came out. Really pretty fascinating. Here's our classic Persky, but it's in 3 dimensions, obviously. And I can zoom down into huge levels of detail, infinitely, of course.
Yeah, that's the Sierpinski, right? 3D.
Sierpinski, right. It's the Mandelbulber. Like I said, they just released this. This is another wonderful outgrowth of the internet and its kind of nature as a petri dish that I think was unexpected as far as developers go. Someone, how would you do a Mandelbrot set in 3D? And it's, perhaps try this, because there's generally they were generally using the complex plane 2 dimensions for the classical Mandelbrot set. But let's throw in, let's turn it into a quaternion where there's 3 imaginary terms, and it's like all of a sudden they start getting all this stuff out of it, and there was this just forum that was just, they were just all super energized by the fact that they could do it. And then this application came out of it, I mean, they're all like starving artists, except they're like really killer programmers, of course, but some great things have come out of it. I just downloaded it over the weekend and started playing around with it. Let me see if I can find where I have some of the ones that I did here. Yeah, so I did this one. This is a render. I mean, it looks quite a bit like snow, right? Kind of. Right. That's all fractal rendering.
That's crazy. Although it looks like some of the things that we saw on the geology tour, though. Just looking at some of the rocks that had that look to them, like they had like a H.R. Giger spine across it or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, this is not someone, the artist, there's no envisioning. It's just like, oh, let's see what this does. It's like experimenting,
Well, it's a computer that generated it, right? Like it's not.
Let it go.
Let it do its thing, and then paint. Oh, well, this is a wonderful nightmare fuel for you. Here you are.
Right. Right. It's a nightmare, but it could also produce a really cool dream that's happy. So.
Oh, I'm sure, but those are not what that. See, that looks better. Sort of lifelike, but weird.
Now, I mean, if you look at it, what's the reason it looks better? It's because it's more coherent. There's coherent geometry in it, obviously, right? With the repetitive pattern and then beautiful proportions, right?
Well, and the fact that it didn't remind me of one of the most horrifying videos of movies of all time that scarred me for life since 1986. But yeah. I mean, it got me so good
because it is
when I was a kid, obviously.
Yeah. That's frightening stuff. It's Geiger.
Geiger, whatever.
He was. I mean, that's a very disturbed artist. He's an awesome artist. He's beautiful.
Yes.
He's very, very disturbed.
But they were beautiful. I mean, in their own right. I mean, in a horrifying way.
Right. I mean, the execution is just amazing. Right. The execution of the artist. Not his death. His ability to produce that level of. I've seen some of his work outside of it too. He's a great artist. So anyway, here's another thing that was generated. This is not quite as beautiful, but it certainly rings of traipsing through a briar patch, for sure. But this gets into the hyperbolic kind of ideas of mapping, etc. So and it comes out of our looking at hyperbolic space versus Euclidean space. So and then I have to thank Buddy once again for introducing me to Segerman. Although it was a little bit of a rocky start, he's certainly going in this direction with things.
Oh yeah, he's great. Everyone's got to look him up. We got to send some links on him.
Yeah. So here's one. This one's pretty cool. Can you hear? Is the music too loud?
No, that's okay.
This was done. This is out of that group, but this was done. This is old. Like 2010. but this is an example of what Manfold does.
Well, as long as the music's not copyrighted, we'll be fine.
Yeah. I'll turn it down a little bit. Because we can talk over it. We can do the Mystery Science Theater thing on this, of course. But once again, you can see this. It's producing some pretty interesting output.
Wow. Yeah. Almost looks like a brain.
Yeah, or broccoli, right?
There was another one I saw by, there was a video called Monument with like Robyn and a bunch of other, an Icelandic band, I assume, or Finnish band or something. And they had these going in, like they were like, obviously it looked like they were taking drugs and I don't know, they were lying there on a white thing, but this started happening around them, stuff like this. And I was like, whoa.
Evening, yo.
There he is.
Neil.
Hey.
Don't you feel like below the asteroid seeing music, seeing this? Neil knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Now we're exploring Mandelbrot.
Like crater impacts. A lot of crater impacts.
It looks like what's left after you etch something to literal pieces.
But I mean, it's a crazy thing because it's one of these things where you let it go and you see what it does, you know? and then you work with it as it does its thing. And there's Sopinski right at the end. But anyway, so once again, this has been going on since like about 2010, 2011, and it's really interesting. And I highly recommend if you feel like an explorer at all to check out. Here we go. Yeah, this thing. It's a Mandelbalder, and they just did a release. I think it was over the weekend. Ultimately, it's a brand new one. So I've just scratched it. Like I said, here's the. Let's see. I think it's here. Yeah. So here's let's try another one. Go render. So here's a cubic area. This version is actually more sophisticated than the one you saw that video with, but I will not be able to operate it nearly to the level that, and the rendering. I was looking at some of the ones that people had done, and the rendering would takes for like something that's really pretty exotic. It's like 12, 15 minutes per frame. So you can imagine the amount of, if you wanted to do something on a large scale, you'd have to go to that whole, render farm thing. I'm sure Neil's familiar with that kind of animal.
Well, actually, not on that level. We usually just let it run through the Amiga and then go away for like 40 hours and then it'll be done.
Right.
Are you using Amigas?
Well, way back when I was playing with stuff like that, ray tracing and stuff like this. This is more complex versions and obviously a lot crazier. But, I mean, today we have video games that, are so powerful. So I'm impressed with the power of the video cards. I'm just saying that. What?
Yeah, well, they are pretty powerful Amigas that came after people stopped using them for games. Even after, even in this century, I think even today still some. Now maybe not today anymore, but still some years ago, but there were still new Amigas being used.
Nothing compares to EVE Online. I rest my case.
Yep.
So anyway, one of the things that I get that comes out of this is there's like this is repetitive spatial frequency pretty clearly, just as far as like a concept goes, And anyway, this is the world of fractals as we know it, as it is continuing to present itself, and pretty exciting to be able to be kind of like once again we're on all these crazy kind of forefronts perhaps of things, but this is where Buddy's pointing in the direction, and it's certainly a real direction that I think has an immense amount of potential place to have new discoveries that we haven't had before. Obviously, it's a discovery. So, just to get back, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you guys were talking about. So
we were trying to.
I didn't know if you mentioned. I didn't know if you mentioned my name.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I thought I caught that. I thought I heard you. I appreciate that. Thank you, David.
Yeah. You're welcome, buddy.
Well, yeah. I'm picking my kid up from school right now, so I'm like in and out listening. Sorry.
It's all good.
All right.
So one of the things that I've seen like a lot is this hyperbolic, hyperbolic geometry is playing a big role for me, and I'm seeing like a lot of this stuff kind of come together. It's particularly with even with these with the mandelbulbar, and then as well as looking at what comes out of phyllotaxis. And this is pretty fascinating to start seeing these pieces kind of come together a little bit here. Just come down here 1 second. And there's one other thing I want to share that's pretty funny. So, why don't we stop here? Ito, since you're on, and you shared this with me, I found this really fascinating. I thought it might be a fun one to talk about a little bit. This patent.
Which one? I'm sorry?
This is the United States patent.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That one.
What am I looking at?
Yeah. You want to give an overview of it? I've looked at it a bit, but why don't you give an overview of it, Ito, from your perspective?
Well, there's an article, and I think I shared that one on Facebook as well. So General Motors came out with a patent application on February the 15th, I believe, this year. And it's an approved patent, as far as I understand. And it is a patent.
Wait, the dates on the article, the web pages that are talking about this patent were much older.
No, it says right there, February 18, 2018.
No, I saw a much older year. That was years ago.
Well, one says filed April 2014.
No clue. I'm looking at this patent right here, right? This is an actual patent. It could be a forgery for all I know, but if you click on the link on the news article, you actually end up looking at that thing, right? So it says this year, February 18th, it is a patent for a fusion reactor. Fusion reactor. There's
a compact
no
one
in the world right now.
Yeah, I know. That's why I asked if it was a fake, because obviously there isn't any.
It's certainly got legs on the internet. I mean, it's not. There's not one source of it. I did that. I found at least 5 or 6 sources.
Well, I have questioned myself very much. From what we could gather, because in detail there's a lot of detail lacking, what you can see here, I guess for obvious reasons, right? But it is a fusion reactor. It doesn't. At first I thought it looks like a cold fusion reactor. Then I thought it was a hot fusion reactor, which is still mind-boggling because that doesn't exist either. But it more or less resembles, I would say, sapphire, because they're talking about contained plasma,
right?
And doing something with it, and then they have a sort of mirrored Holter-like toroidal field almost, sort of pushing against each other. They're injecting fuel, and allegedly this thing on 25 pounds of fuel, so you're thinking tritium and deuterium, that kind of stuff, 25 pounds of fuel can fuel a thing like this for 1 year, and then a constant output, what was it, 1 megawatt or something like that, a whole bunch. 80,000 homes you can power with it, or a whole carrier like the Nimitz.
That's crazy.
So this is an approved patent. Is it real? I have questions myself. It's real enough that they say they are actually building
They're building
these
it,
things.
Yeah. Yep. It's
So
a skunk works kind of
you
thing.
tell me if it's real.
And they're announcing it, so
Even if it's hot
really,
fusion, it's
really
mind-boggling.
Yeah. I mean, the one that comes to mind, just as far as like you know how we, or particularly, perhaps I go down, but it's like I see like these two, spinning toruses coming together, and here's the focal point, ultimately, going opposite directions.
Is it possible to patent something that doesn't work at all? Is it possible?
Sure. It's possible to do. It's possible.
No, well, there has to be some reality to it, I believe. Yes. You can't do something fictive, if you will, imaginary. You can't patent that.
Okay.
Well,
my question, it's the question. Well, I know the patent is there. You can look at it. The news article is there. It's from General Motors, and allegedly, when you keep reading, they are building these things, and this is the so many of prototype, and they're right now building it, allegedly. So, what is going on here? That is my question too. If it's hot fusion, that's mind-boggling. We can close the tokamak reactor because they build it, done, buy it off the shelf. If it's cold fusion or something like Sapphire, it's still mind-boggling, and it would be an absolutely earth-shattering breakthrough in energy terms for humanity. So I think this is a newsworthy article.
Certainly worthy of more snooping around on what's going on with it. Yeah.
It's more like cold fusion, actually. It's more like Sapphire.
Yeah, I mean, I'm envisioning what the plasma's doing, in there.
Well, if somebody can explain that part to me, because my mind doesn't work like that. My mind is constantly busy with the elements, right?
But
I can understand the reaction, but not the mechanism to ignite it that way.
So here's the heat injector, right?
They do apply
heat.
They preheat the plasma. Yeah.
I'm applying my sparse knowledge of sonoluminescence with all this harmonic stuff we've been looking at, and it's like you get that thing spun up to high frequency focal point right at that point where those heat injectors are. That's the sonoluminescence, so to speak, of it. That's my.
So there's already pressure.
That's a projection of what I'm thinking.
So if there's, and I call it pressure, in that focal point, and then you heat that again, that might be enough to ignite the fusion reaction. Is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah.
Neil, you're quiet. Can you add something to the mix?
I could. I'm concerned about their heat injectors. What are they actually doing? Are they just two lasers? Because I don't think that's what's happening here.
They're heat injectors.
So they're basically just thermally heating that thing up. And then they have two coils, electromagnetic coils, and they're trying to get basically the plasmoid in the middle of them. And so it won't go flying.
It feels like a plasmoid center, right?
Well, that's probably what I would... Yeah. I mean, the problem is the problem is with the toroidal one, the tokamak reactors or whatever, it always ended up filamenting and touching one of the sides and screwing up. So maybe they were working on a completely different, because it looks like a completely different idea, one that they thought was much more stable. And I can see why they would think that. I mean, if you create a massive point, it's going to want to stay in the middle. Won't want to go left, right, or up or down. It'll want to, because there's that magnetic field. If they're twisting opposite to each other, they should have a plasmoid right dead center where those two bars are touching.
So that's probably how they create that containment field. That's probably what's happening there. I'm sure they have all kinds of ways of making sure that's exactly the right condition. then that bubble in the center, they heat up, and that's where the reaction should take place.
Well, that's what they're hoping for, to push at that and then make it self-sustaining, so they can probably remove those rods. I mean,
well, they have remember, this is basically an engine.
Yeah. Well, but it's a heat engine, right?
It's a heat engine.
It's just generating heat.
Yes, it generates tremendous heat due to the fusion reaction, and that gets expelled, used for propulsion, whatever, right? Or creating electricity, and that stuff gets fed back.
So this whole object is suspended inside water or something?
No, they're talking about putting it in airplanes and boats.
Well, yeah, but how is it making the heat? How are you transferring the heat into another usable form is what I meant.
Oh, that's heat transfers, heat pumps with molten salt and stuff.
Right, so they're going to dip it in. It looks like this whole object could be set inside.
For example, counter-rotating and molten salt, for example, that's the heat transfer. And they can even drive a jet engine that way. That's already been done.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. In fact, I think that's pretty cool. But what I meant is that basically that whole thing turns into a giant heater that you set inside something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it has to be too big either. I don't know the size per se.
No, that's why they depict an airplane there.
It's very interesting.
Very, 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 very interesting. This is going to be groundbreaking for all kinds of military technology. Airplanes, in the air for a week or no problem.
To me, all they're doing is making ball lightning. But
that's what it feels. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that we were talking about. What is ball lightning? Why does it self-perpetuate long after it should be? There was a gentleman who
their plasma is not nearly hot enough to call it hot fusion, and I mean not nearly. You need millions of degrees officially. That's what they're trying to do in the tokamak, right?
Right.
Here's that article. But this stuff is not millions and millions of degrees.
Oh. Okay.
So that's why I call it, it's much more like sapphire. It's a plasma chamber. And they're getting fusion reactions.
That's exactly what it sounds like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's something going on here. Not just as in ground-shattering, earth-shattering, groundbreaking, something. But sapphire may have competition here. Cool.
Well, yeah, but we're using ours is a science project. They're trying to rule the world, so
they made an applicable thing.
Oh no, but yeah, but they're trying to imitate the sun. Is what I meant. So
every ship has unlimited power. It's container size, right? It's a container size, one big truck.
That's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. It is.
There, is that them putting them there? Yeah.
It looks like it. Yeah. You want to hear it? Let's see. I haven't listened to this one. Weird.
The small is the reason.
Yeah, here they explain here the way they develop it. So they started with small inventions, if you will, and trying to make quick cycles of development, right?
Every time you do plasma physics, you learn something new. And that's why this is a high-risk, high-payoff endeavor. That's what we're doing here, is testing that concept out to see if it really holds the promise that it appears to. And as a defense company, our increasing mission is to enhance global security, and this is how we do that in the energy realm.
Bomb people.
40 gigawatts of gas turbines a year. The gas line going into that gas turbine, we're going to replace that with a heat exchanger coming off our fusion reactor. We basically use the gas turbine infrastructure completely. We partner with one of those companies, and we ship fusion-powered turbine plants around the world, and we expand that technology. Gas turbines are a huge improvement over other technologies in terms of climate change, but they're only a 50% improvement. We take it all the way. So no emissions, safe operation, proliferation-free. That means we can ship it to the whole world with a good conscience.
Sure.
I love that you said sure.
I love these productions,
Technology wasn't right for us. We can achieve that grand vision and bring clean power to the world. the true atomic age can start.
Yeah, I don't trust them.
So are we witnessing the revolution here, energy-wise for humanity? Are we going to go to the future now?